Welcome to New Teacher Talk. My name is Amy Howerton, and I am an English teacher and English department chairperson at Oswego High School in Oswego, Illinois.
And I'm Isabel Wild, a first-year English teacher at Oswego High School.
Today, we'd like to share ideas about how to navigate the interview process, which actually begins well before the in-person interview. After today's podcast, you should walk away with ideas to help you navigate that process and gain confidence as you approach the hiring season. Isabel and I are here today because I actually interviewed Isabel as a first-year teacher, and this is her first year in education.
Yes.
So, Isabel, as we prepare for our listeners today, we'd like to start with the idea about making a good first impression, but to do so virtually. Mm-hmm. So if you could share how you went about creating a good first impression with your resume and a cover letter last spring, probably about this time.
This time last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
Absolutely. So the resume and cover letter are the first two, I would say, major documents that you have to upload. Your resume, has all of your previous experiences, probably where you've student taught and completed clinicals at. The cover letter, though, is extremely underrated in my opinion. Putting in the research of the schools you're applying to, the districts, looking at mission statements, and really just making it personal. A resume, I feel people read to learn about your experience, but that cover letter can allow them a little space and aspect into who you are before, an actual interview gets set. Going to job fairs, networking, looking on LinkedIn, really just covering all your bases of things online is really important because online comes first before in person.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Those are really good tips to start with. I love that you mentioned that you did a lot of research and when you went online. LinkedIn is a good place to start. Mm-hmm. Educators don't often use a lot of those resources as much as the other kind of business professions do, but that's a really great way to network and see some of the other professionals that you're going to want to connect with.
Yeah.
Looking at mission statements, you also mentioned.
Yeah.
Really important. Mm-hmm. How did you use the information of mission statements and the research that you did in districts? How did you use that in your cover letter and resume?
So I can't remember either on my cover letter if I put a picture of a small panther or not. But looking at the mission statements in the districts, because you don't want to be in a district if you don't agree with what their mission is.
That's a good point.
And being able to tie in what their statement is with things that you care about and what you want to bring into the classroom. It allows you to start to align some of those goals, and being able to see that is really important. And I think it can be a good discussion in an interview.
Good. As someone who's on the receiving end of those cover letters and resumes, I really appreciate when an applicant has done their research to take a look at the place that they're interviewing for. They understand the school, they understand the district. They've put in the time and effort to really understand not just a job, but the mission and the vision of the school. And then when that is integrated into the cover letter, that tells me as the recipient of that information and that communication that you care about that job. Mm-hmm. It's not just an employment for you, that you really care about the school and the children that the school represents.
Yeah.
So really great tip.
Yes.
So once you send those things out and yay, next step, you get a phone call and an interview. In anticipating of that phone call and emails, that's often the second step of that interview process. So what did you learn about that stage of the process when you get that next step of the phone call, the interview, the emails? What are those things that you learned in that stage?
Well, besides constantly checking your email, phone calls, and everything, it's really important to communicate quickly, whether that be if they give you a phone call or if they send you an email. Checking your email and also your spam folder. Everyone has like 14 different folders in their emails. Check every single one, and your voicemail, and just really being on time and checking everything frequently. I received communication via email for all first round interviews. Some districts might be through phone, just making sure, but make sure all communication that you do is formal. Check your spelling. Mm-hmm. Don't send emojis. You are on that formal basis where now they're actually starting to communicate with you, but they don't know you. So just making sure that your formal interview times work in your schedule, work with them. You are more than willing to do an interview at any time.
Yeah.
it's really hard if you say no and that like hesitation. Make sure you're polite. Conversation matters, especially if it's on the phone. And make sure to references if they haven't been contacted, giving maybe like a heads up to past mentor teachers. Hey, I have an interview. If you get a phone call, it might be them.
Yes.
And making sure just all information's up to date.
Good reminders. I really like the idea of reaching out to your references to give them a heads up. You don't want any of the references to be unaware that they might receive a phone call, because you want them to speak well of you on your behalf. And the other thing that is really valuable is to be formal in that communication. Answer the phone calls, check the emails, check the voicemails, and make sure that voicemail box is available to take messages. I can't even tell you how many times I try to call applicants and leave voicemails, and I can't because the voicemail box is full. That is really important, that you're available to receive the communications, because sometimes that's the make or break it for a second round interview or a first round interview if I can't get a hold of the applicant. Well, Isabel, thank you for telling us about that stage of the process of the phone call and getting the interview and anticipating all of that. It's really a second very important part of that process.
Yes, it is.
Now we come to the actual interview, which is the exciting part.
So nervous.
But it's really fun, right?
No, it is.
When you land that interview. So how can you, as a first-year teacher who was recently hired, congratulations,
Thank you.
How could you offer tips to our listeners about how to maximize that in-person interview so they can get hired?
So pick out your outfit the night before. Make sure you look professional, dress professionally.
Be prepared.
Be prepared in all aspects. Be ready. Eat a meal. You might not feel like it because you're nervous, but you don't want to sit there and think you're going to pass out because you're on an empty stomach.
True.
Make sure you come prepared. Scout the location ahead of time. I remember being told I had to go to like door 37.
Yeah,
and I
that's
was
tough.
like, where is door 37? So making sure you leave yourself extra time if you don't look up a map on your phone, computer earlier. Arriving early, because you never know if geese want to cross the road all at one time and you can't make it.
Often when, because I've been conducting interviews for a long time with candidates, and if the interview happens to take place at the very beginning of the school day or at the end of school day, when there's like parent drop off or pickup or, student release or beginning of the school day, the traffic can be really hectic. So the timing of the interview also makes a difference.
Yes.
And knowing that, regardless, arriving early is always a good tip to have, right? Always arriving early is very good. That will also give you as the candidate time to feel prepared and not rushed, which also means then you're going to be more ready for the actual interview. You'll
Yes.
feel calm and prepared.
Yep.
Okay. So what else? What about when you get into the interview? What are some tips you have for our listeners when they get into the actual building and they get in for that interview?
So when you get into the building, you check in, let's say front desk. Introduce yourself. I'm here for an interview. They'll probably tell you what to do. And then let's say you're going towards the room. You're like being led with people. Make sure eye contact, introducing yourself, shaking hands. I really enjoy. I think it's something everyone should do. And just introducing yourself and
Being personable.
yes.
Yes.
Make sure coming prepared with materials, no computers. No computers.
That's a good tip. Why would you say no computers? I agree with you.
Because it becomes this like block. It's like a screen block versus if you have a piece of paper and even if it has 100 questions on it, it's flat, it's something that's discrete and it doesn't interrupt the flow of conversation where I have to look at a computer and then you can like glance at the paper and then look up.
I think going tech low there is a good tip because it does not create that barrier between you and the person you're really trying to connect with in the interview. And you also mentioned having questions. I love that. I do, especially as somebody who interviews people quite a bit. It shows me something when you bring questions into the interview. Why do you mention that? Tell our listeners why you brought questions to the interview.
So I brought questions pre-written on a piece of paper because I knew I would never in a million years be able to really remember what I wanted to ask because I was probably really, really nervous. And I was. And I sat there and I was like, oh, my questions. And they're on the piece of paper. And it's nice because you can take a little quick notes if you need to. But coming with questions, if you look at, like we mentioned previously, the mission statements and I really love deep diving into school websites. There's so much to learn, activities, what's available, students, teachers, and that's where I generated a lot of my questions from.
There's a richness that's available for free online.
For free.
Right? So do that research. It's a really rich opportunity to find out a lot about schools. So developing those questions and you bringing those in, I mean, I know it provided you a sense of calm because you had those pre-written and pre-prepared. But this is what it tells me as somebody who's interviewing. It tells me that A, you've done your research. B, that you care enough to ask the questions, because you would be surprised how many people when as an interviewer, I turn it over and say, do you have any questions for us? And like, nope, we're fine. Ask questions, right? It's so important to ask questions because that means you really do care about the job. And it also means that you have things that you want in your job. So you are also looking for something. And then that tells me that you are going to be a good fit for us because you have something that you want. And I'm looking to see if that's going to be a match. Is that going to be a match for us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really good to have those interview questions prepared. What else? There's so many things in that interview, right? There's so many things happening there.
Questions. You're going to be asked multiple questions about all sorts of things. It's really important to make sure you answer questions fully, but not with an overflow of words.
Yeah.
Being able to just take a second, even if it's a question you don't know, sit for a second and just process what is the most important thing that I have to say about this question. Because it's really easy to start yapping, and then it's 5 minutes later and you just yapped about the first question. But staying concise and specific, because there are a list of questions that they do need to get through.
They do. And often interviews are on a time schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, they really are. I like the idea of taking a pause. If you're not quite sure and you need a moment to think, it's okay to tell the interview panel or the interview person, that's a great question. Can I think about that for a moment? It's also appropriate to say, could you ask that again, please? Because sometimes your brain is going a mile a minute and maybe you didn't really hear that question fully.
Yeah.
There's oftentimes in interviews where there are multi-part questions that they're asking. And so you're not going to retain every part of that question as it is asked. So it's perfectly acceptable to say, could you either rephrase or repeat the question, please?
Yeah.
Good ideas.
Yeah.
Good ideas.
I think I did that with the standards question.
You did, yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell our listeners a little bit about that question? That's a good one.
So in all the questions I was being asked, there was one that stood out to me and kind of stumped me. And I was like, oh. And it was to list a specific standard that's important in my instruction. And
A learning standard.
learning standard, yes. And I literally was trying to think of the actual, like, on the website, learning standard, like what it is. And I just needed a second. And I was like, that's a really great question. Let me think for just a moment. And
That was a great way to handle that, by the way.
because I was just processing, and you have to take the second to process, because if you try to answer in that moment, my answer wouldn't have been good. And finding a way where I didn't really know exactly how to answer that question, but connecting it to mentioning some of what I already do in the classroom. And I think I talked about how, like, writing was really important.
You did.
Yeah.
You talked about
okay.
writing.
That's what I thought. And I talked about
I think
writing.
you talked about argument writing, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So even though I couldn't probably be as specific as you were looking for, but still being able to narrow in a little bit more than I'm not really sure, because you do know, and just taking a second to process.
Good. And it is okay to take a moment and gather your thoughts before responding, because taking that moment will give you a better response.
Yes.
Good advice. Another thing that I remember about your interview was that your personality really shined through. And I think that made a real difference in the interview, because you can't really hide who you are, nor should you.
Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
I feel like when it comes to interviews, especially like post-college, first career step, it's really thrown onto people that you need to be as professional as possible and you need to answer these things a certain way. And while I agree in some ways, it's really important to be yourself. And especially in the aspect of teaching, your personality is forefront to the classroom that you create. And if you try to hide that in an interview, they're not going to really know who you are, and you don't want to sound monotone or like a robot. And they're not going to know everything about you or who you are from one interview, but even just a little scope into who you are really makes a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that personality is of value because it's going to come out sooner or later.
Yes.
And you don't want to have to hide who you really are.
Yep.
And the person hiring you wants to know who you really are.
Yeah, they do.
To make sure it's a good fit for both of you.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about at the end of the interview? What is a recommendation?
At the end, thank you for the opportunity and the time. Shake hands once again with everyone in the room. As you're leaving, if you're in like the main office and there's other people in there, say bye as well, even if it's just to have a good rest of your day. And just thank you for the opportunity and walk out those doors.
That main office administrative staff, they also share their impressions of candidates too. And so they'll often give a thumbs up or kind of like a meh. So yes, they're like, oh, that was a great candidate, such a kind person. And so it's really important to make an impression to everyone you in the school, not just the people in the interview panel.
Yeah, agreed.
Good. Okay, interview's over. Deep breath.
Deep breath.
So after that interview, what are the recommendations you would have? Because you know the adrenaline might be flowing, but the process really isn't over yet.
No, it is not.
So what are your suggestions for the follow-up after the interview?
Sending a quick follow-up email. Keep it formal. Just because you've met them doesn't mean you are best friends.
And it's not a text message either.
No, it is not.
No, it's no formal emails.
Formal email. Keep all lines of communication open, like we said previously, whether it's emails, phone calls. After a first interview, you're more likely to get a phone call than an email, but still pay attention to both. Keep all lines of communication open. Continue checking job openings as well. You never know what's out there. And if this interview doesn't go well, there are more opportunities out there. So just being aware and send that follow-up email sooner rather than later.
I have had candidates that I will receive a thank you email 10 minutes after they've left, which means they're sitting in their car sending an email from their phone right in the parking lot. So I know it's like immediate after they've left the interview, which I give them kudos. They're sending it, they're thankful, and they've mentioned something specific about the interview.
Yes.
Which I also really like, that they're reflecting on the interview and they've shared something that they've learned about the school or something that we've talked about in the interview that makes it personal.
Yeah.
I also want to mention that some interview teams have some more lengthy processes. It's very common, the system that we have is we have at least 2 rounds of interviews.
Yep.
Some schools have teaching examples, so they'll have kind of like a model teaching example that happens, whether you're teaching to the interview panel, usually not in front of students, but kind of like a mock teaching experience. But there could be multiple interviews, demonstrations, tours of the school building. That sometimes can happen as well. Just be prepared that there could be a variety of ways schools might handle that interview process.
Yeah, I agree.
But part of that is also, and you mentioned this earlier, making sure that your references are ready.
Yes, ready to go.
Yeah, those are good things. So obviously, there are likely 2 outcomes from that interview process, an offer or no offer. Yeah. So if you don't get the job, what are your recommendations?
Be graceful, be thankful for that opportunity. A lot of people would wish to be in that position, and it's really good experience. Education is also a small world. It is a small world. It's a big world, but it's also small.
Yeah.
And you don't know who knows who, and you never know if you're going to come back to where you once interviewed before.
You never want to burn a bridge. People know people in education, and it's very surprising how small that world of education is in terms of people's relationships and communications. So, for example, I knew a couple people that reached out to me and said, you need to hire Isabel Wild. She's fantastic. So there were a couple people that reached out, 3 actually. It's
Which
a
is
small
crazy.
world, but it's a small world.
No, it is.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of reference, that kind of connectivity happens. And there's also that kind of connectivity of the references that people give, the communication of this person is good, or this person is moving and needs a different job, or this person was looking for something different. Whatever it might be, the world is a small place. So keep those bridges intact.
Put together.
Don't burn them.
Do not burn them.
Right? It's a small world.
Yep.
But hopefully, cross your fingers, you do get the job.
Yes.
Yeah. What's
Yes,
your
yes,
recommendation
yes.
there? Exciting.
If you do get the job, be thankful, stay professional. Again, But start asking all the questions. That's when things become available to you. Curriculum, what that looks like. Just honestly, like next steps.
Yeah.
What are the next steps? What do I need to do? A lot of paperwork, get all of my credentials, and get a badge,
Yeah.
a key fob or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So this is really the exciting part. So
Yes, it
once that hiring, once the offer is out there, once the verbal offer is out there, there are a lot of next steps that come into play. But there are good questions to ask, right? So ask about curriculum, ask about all the things you mentioned. When can I access the building?
When
What
can
are
I
those
come
next
in?
steps? Yeah, who can I meet? Do I have a mentor? Who can I talk to
What
about
is
this
my
new role?
space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have a space? Do I have
Yes.
multiple spaces? What is all this going to happen? But there's also going to be hiring paperwork
Yep.
and lots of things to sign and probably fingerprints and registering at the regional offices of education or variety of things like that. So it's good to ask more questions and
Yes.
become informed and write things down and make sure you're detail oriented and so you are timely with those paperwork
Yes,
things.
being timely is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, really good tips, Isabel. Thank you so much for sharing that
thank you.
experience. Yeah. It's not too far, right? It's,
No.
well, about a year ago.
It is not a year ago.
yeah.
And it goes by so fast. You sit and you feel like you're in this process for a long time. And it might be for a little bit, but once it's done, you can sit there and
Deep breath.
breathe and, what's meant to be will be.
Yeah. I definitely believe that there is a place for people in education. We have
Yes.
so many different needs in our field. So I believe that there is a place for people in education. You just have to find the right one.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing the tips with our educators out there that are looking to get hired in this hiring season. It is about that
Always.
time, right?
Yes,
That's
you
that's
got
what
it.
spring is.
Yes.
Yes,
you
we
got
do
it.
want to wish our listeners well.
Yes.
We do want to wish you the best of luck as you approach the spring hiring season in education. It really is an exciting and also very busy time of the year. So we want to thank our listeners at New Teacher Talk. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a colleague who might benefit. You can also connect with us on Instagram and Blue Sky at New Teacher Talk. Also, subscribe to the New Teacher Talk. New episodes are released every Monday and Wednesday. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.